Hello, welcome to Mr. Bashir's podcast on Wilson's moral diplomacy. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about what moral diplomacy is and how Wilson talked about it and what he thought it was. And then we're going to really move into some applications of that moral diplomacy. We're going to start with Mexico. We're going to look at Haiti and Dominican Republic. And then we will kind of wrap it up. So let's get right into it. As you can see, there's a cartoon here where Wilson's the instructor. And this is something that's almost paramount or important when realizing, looking at moral diplomacy is the idea that inherent in there is this idea of American exceptionalism. So the U.S. should be the conscience of the world, meaning that the U.S. knows what is right. He said that he believes strongly that the force of America is the force of moral principle, and that the idea of America is to serve humanity. As Wilson stated, he believed while other nations use force for the oppression of mankind and their own aggrandizement, the United States would use force only for the elevation of the spirit of the human race. Whatever that means. He believed that the U.S. should move forward with this idea that they could use their military, use their economy to do what is right. And he believed that the United States always knew what was right. And what is right is to spread democracy. That democracy is the only moral government. It is the only Christian government. It is the only government that is right for people. And he believed in promoting peace and the idea of peace. And this is really seen in his time during World War I, where he really wanted that to be the war to end all wars. And he believes that peace is forward. And condemned colonialism. The idea of colonialism is that it's wrong, that it's not right, and that it should not happen. Now, Wilson was known to say that they say the Mexicans are not fitted for self-government. To this I reply that when properly directed, there is no people not fitted for self-government. You can see that he believes with the United States' help, anybody can be a democracy. And at the same time, Wilson militarily intervenes 19 times, 13 against Central America and Caribbean countries. And so the school teacher definitely uses the rod in these instances where the U.S. is constantly involved despite the noble promise of moral diplomacy. We wonder if it is actually applied that way. And then we need to start wondering whether moral diplomacy is really the driving force of Wilson's foreign policy, or is it dollar? Is it to enrich America and to give them control over other countries because of the control of the economy? And at the heart of everything with Wilson is American exceptionalism. As you can see in the quotes that I've already read, that is the basis of moral diplomacy. All right, Mexican Revolution, the backstory. Now, the Mexican Revolution is the backstory of what we need to talk about and Wilson's involvement in the Mexican Revolution, which the Mexican Revolution itself, you could take a whole unit on it. You could take a whole class on it. So we will just kind of give you a rough outline of what happened with some leaders as part of it to give you an idea. Now, at no time when these different leaders take control is Mexico peaceful. And they are constantly competing with other people, other warlords, to try and take advantage. Now, before this happened, Porfirio Diaz was the ruler of Mexico. And Porfirio was a ruler in which he gave foreign companies, foreign investment, foreign people the run of the country. He didn't charge them very much, and they were allowed to invest and take out oil. Standard Oil was in there, and British companies, and he allowed foreign investments to come in and buy land, and then he would use his army to remove the people that were in that land. And so he really was this idea of the export economy and really supporting foreign business more than he supported his own people. So in 1910, Mexico begins to fight back. So in 1910, we see that Mexico and the people of Mexico are fed up. And so what happens is a guy by the name of Madero takes over for Porfirio Diaz, but he makes a couple mistakes. Now, he is a man of the people. You can see Madero right here. He is somebody who the Mexicans feel like will do what is best for Mexico. He talked a lot about doing what was best for Mexico and really making some economic changes. And that made anybody from the foreign interests nervous because they weren't sure what Madero was going to do. Was he going to try and take over their businesses? Was he going to try and nationalize those businesses? What was he going to do? And so at the same time, Madero really struggled to try and unite the revolutionaries of Mexico together because he made a deal with Porfirio Diaz, giving him some time to exit the country, did not charge him anything, but allowed him to kind of to move out of power. Madero then struggled to get all the other revolutionaries on the same page, and they continued to divide into factions. And so the United States was nervous about Madero, and that leads to the next step, which is the Pact of the Embassy. Now, this is before Wilson took power, and basically under Taft, the U.S. ambassador met with Huerta. The ambassador was nervous about Madero, was nervous about what he might do to foreign investment. And so he basically gave Huerta the U.S. go-ahead if he wanted to take power. And Huerta was the commanding general of the Mexican army. And so Huerta took power, and based on the Pact of the Embassy, thought he had U.S. support. And Huerta took power. He then, when Madero, after forcing the resignation of Madero and his vice president, the issue is that right after they resigned, Huerta's men murdered both Madero and his vice president Suarez, murdered both of them, and then took power. At the same time that this is happening, Taft comes out of the presidency and Wilson enters in. Wilson refused to recognize Huerta's government. And there's General Huerta right there. Wilson refused to recognize his government. He refused to say that it was the right thing or that it was the right way. Now, the way we can look at this is that Wilson is this idealist, and he believes that American exceptionalism, he believes that Mexico should be a democracy. And so he basically, Huerta is the one he never falls for. He never wants a relationship with Huerta. He wants Huerta to leave. So he basically says to Huerta, that's fine if you want to take power right now, but you need to hold elections. And you cannot be a candidate. Well, Huerta looks at Wilson and goes, well, I'm not really interested in a relationship with you at all, so I'm just going to do what I feel is right for Mexico. So Wilson then offers him a loan if he will hold elections. Offers him a large U.S. loan if he is willing to hold elections. What policy does it sound like? The one we just talked about, which is dollar diplomacy. And so Wilson offers the loan with the idea that Huerta would then hold elections and they could then become a democracy. And he told Congress that he would do watchful waiting over the Mexican situation, and that and while he's doing this watchful waiting, he continues to work against Huerta because he wants his new friend Carranza to take power. So here is U.S. troops marching through Veracruz. So let's figure out why U.S. troops are marching down the center of the Mexican port city. So in 1913, he doesn't give Huerta recognition. He even gets Britain to stop talking to Huerta. It's a bad breakup between Wilson and Huerta. He gets all his friends. It would be like when you break up, you want all your friends not to even talk to him. So he says, gets Britain to rescind the recognition, and then he basically bribes Britain by saying you won't have to pay any more canal fees. You could just come in and out when you want to. So the situation is good for Britain. So William Jennings Bryan sends a series of notes to the U.S. Embassy telling them to proceed to employ such means as necessary to secure the goal of overthrowing Huerta. And so that brings us to this guy. So what happens is this guy, so he wants to help Carranza. He wants to basically start dating Carranza, so he needs Huerta to go away. And so the idea then is that what happens is Huerta makes a mistake. He arrests U.S. soldiers, U.S. sailors from the USS Tampico, or in Tampico, from the USS Dolphin. The U.S. admiral who was in charge of those sailors basically wanted an informal apology, because once Huerta realized he arrested those soldiers on April 9th in 1913, he said, "Hey, whoa, we don't actually really want to arrest them, so we're going to go ahead and release them." But he wasn't going to give them the formal military salute, because basically that looks like to all Mexicans that he's backing down to the U.S. and that he won't stand up to the U.S., which is not going to help him continue to try and take power of all of Mexico. And so Huerta refuses to give that. And so Congress basically tells Wilson, hey, you can go ahead and punish him. And that brings us to this issue right here. That basically Wilson uses the power Congress gives him to go into Veracruz and take over the port. And what he's doing is taking over the port is that there was a German ship full of arms for Huerta, because obviously the United States isn't going to sell him any military aid. So he gets it from Germany so that he can continue to fight Carranza. And basically what happens then is that Huerta, or the soldiers at Veracruz, resist. And over 126 Mexicans were killed when Wilson took over. He had no idea why they would resist. He was surprised, he was shocked, he told friends that he couldn't believe that Mexicans were shooting at Americans when they invaded Mexico. I don't know. It seems pretty self-explanatory. So Wilson agreed to have, basically at this point, Argentina, Brazil, and Chile saying, we need to mediate between you guys, you need to stop fighting, let's figure out what we can do. And so they hold the Niagara Falls Conference in 1914. Wilson shows up, but Huerta doesn't. And basically, this conference leads to the removal of Huerta, because basically Mexicans are no longer willing to support Huerta, and they many of the different revolutionaries throw behind Carranza, and Carranza assumes control. So finally, Wilson has his new girlfriend here, Carranza. But unfortunately, Carranza doesn't really like Wilson. Carranza doesn't want anything to do with Wilson. If he wants to control Mexico, he cannot date Wilson. And so basically he tells Wilson to stick it. Well, Wilson's feelings are hurt, obviously. And so Wilson has to take a new view. And so the idea is, he early was an advocate of Carranza, wanted to date Carranza. Carranza says, sorry, man, I don't want anything to do with you. Not only do I not want to go on a date with you, I don't want anything to do with you. Basically, Carranza's doing this to solidify his power in Mexico. And so he just basically tells Wilson to stick it. So Wilson moves on. He moves on to Pancho Villa. During the time he starts to support Pancho Villa gets into a fight with Carranza. The constitutionalists of Carranza's army fights Villa, and Villa is defeated quite resoundingly. And because he is defeated, that basically Wilson steps back. Wilson's not happy with the German activity, because basically Germany, Carranza is working with Germany and with Mexico and Germany is starting to work its way into the hemisphere. And so Wilson basically says, you know what, I'm done with this Mexican thing. I don't want any more girlfriends here or boyfriends here. I'm moving on. So Wilson gives de facto recognition to Carranza, meaning that the U.S. basically doesn't work against Carranza and just says, you know what, we're going to deal with you. You're not going through elections. You're not doing what we want, but we're going to go with you here. Well, Villa gets mad. And it's just a violent breakup. So Villa, right after Wilson basically recognizes Carranza, takes a bunch of American miners out of a train and shoots them in the back of the head in execution style. He then goes across the border to Columbus, New Mexico, killing 17 Americans and sacking the town, meaning taking anything of value and leaving. Now, why would Villa go after the Americans? Well, I think part of it was because he knew the Americans would come after him. And the hope was that they would get into a fight with Carranza that would weaken Carranza enough that Villa could then take control. And he would be a hero to Mexicans for fighting the U.S. Now, basically what happens is right after he raids the town, Wilson sends John Blackjack perishing after Villa. And he chases Villa all through northern Mexico, but fails to be able to find him and his army in order to engage them. And so basically the U.S. Army is going all around northern Mexico trying to find Villa, and it fails to do that. Well, while that's happening, so that happens between 1917 and 1918. And after Pershing leaves, a dispute arose between U.S. oil companies and Carranza in 1918. Basically, Carranza takes over the oil fields of Standard Oil and says, you must pay your back taxes, because Standard Oil had not paid those taxes. Basically saying, this is the actual value of what you have, you need to pay it. And Wilson at this point is done with Mexico. Done with Carranza, done with Villa, done with all of them. And so basically they tell Standard Oil, you got to figure it out on your own. And so we see a U.S. company no longer being supported, and they have to figure it out. And he wisely uses restraint, steps back, and Standard Oil then has to pay Mexico fair prices. Because Mexico said in their own constitution in 1917 that we own all the minerals below our soil. And because of that, that's why Carranza, because of that constitution of 1917, steps in and says, no, you need to pay us because it's our oil, not yours. And it doesn't matter what agreements you have with people of Mexico, the oil is ours. So, other countries and moral diplomacy. We are going to cover the other countries in class and do an activity with them. So we are just mainly going to focus on this one, on his intervention in Mexico. So please bring any questions you have to class, and we will actually let's go over Haiti real quick, and then we'll be done. So I'm going to teach South American republics to elect good men, Wilson said. Now, what does that remind you of? What ideology does that remind you of? So Haiti, negotiations with Haiti. Secretary of State William Jennings Bryan gets into negotiations. And this is happening in 1915. And this is while World War I is going on in Europe. So after the murder of the current president, Wilson basically, so William Jennings Bryan is working. He's trying to get a treaty with Haiti, the right to appoint a customs receiver and a financial advisor, meaning that the United States would take over the customs of Haiti to pay off their debts and to pay U.S. debts, right, that they have to the U.S., because part of this is that they would take a large loan from the United States. They would have a right to supervise Haitian elections, a potential naval base on the northwest corner of the island, and they would be able to reorganize because if they take a financial advisor, they would reorganize the Haitian economy. Well, President Guillermo Sam was assassinated after executing 170 prisoners. He was taken by people, and they dismembered him in the street. So when that happened, Wilson sends in the Navy. And so the USS Washington to take control of Haiti. The naval admiral then takes over and basically runs Haiti as a military U.S. military government from 1916 until 1924, and basically they force the Haitians to agree with the treaty above, and they have to accept that treaty, and so Haiti becomes a protectorate of the United States. And basically, they attempted fiscal reform, built roads, but these projects were disbanded when U.S. troops left. The only lasting impact was the U.S. trained the National Police Force, which gave rise to a dictator who was able to take over and run Haiti with that basically as a dictator. So we will continue this in class. So this is the end of the video. So please bring any questions you have to class, and we will continue to look at moral diplomacy and Wilson's application.